Hello, year ones! How are you doing? Are you well? Excellent. Welcome to another problem of the week! Yay! Now, before we get started with this lesson, there is somebody I want to introduce you to. It's Lucas the Bear's great friend, Tao Tao. Come on, Tao Tao. Say hello to the year ones.
Hello, year ones.
Now, Tao Tao loves maths, isn't that right, Tao Tao?
I love maths.
And when he heard about the great maths work that you were doing, he really wanted to get involved and help out. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Good. Well, we're really lucky to have you. So let's get.
When are we starting the lesson then?
Sorry, I was just saying we're gonna get started now. Okay.
Oh, good. Well, go on then.
Sorry. Sorry. Let's have a look at this screen to begin with for a quick recap on last week's learning. Can you remember what we did? Well, before we looked at equal and unequal groups. Last week we looked at adding up the equal groups to find the total, to find the whole. In the image you can see there are 6 pairs of shoes, and a pair is a group of 2, isn't that right? So that's the same as 6 groups of 2 shoes. And then to find out how many shoes there are altogether in total, you have to add up those 6 groups of 2, don't you? You need to do 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, which is equal to 12. And we counted in 2s, didn't we? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So there's 12 shoes altogether. Now we're going to build on that this week by looking at something very important, which is linked with equal groups, and it's linked with multiplication and division that you'll be looking at later on, and it's called arrays. Now, I don't know if you've come across an array before, but they're really, really useful to help you understand lots of things in maths. An array is where you organize things really, really neatly into equal groups. And in an array, you have to have the same amount in each row. These are the rows here going across. Rows go across, okay, from left to right. You might know the word horizontal. So rows are horizontal. You have to have the same amount in each row. You also have to have the same amount in each column. We call these columns. It's a trickier word than row. There's a silent N there. Tricky. They're columns. So in an array, you have the same number in each row, and you also must have the same number in each column. In this array, how many rows are there? Well, there are 3. 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows. And how many columns are there? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. Let's look at some examples. Can you see the tray of eggs here? Well, trays of eggs come in arrays, don't they? Because there's always going to be the same number of eggs in each row and each column. That's before you take any eggs out of the tray, of course. Now have a look at the picture of the eggs. Can you complete the 2 sentences? There are how many rows and there are how many eggs in each row. Well, how many rows are there? Remember, rows go across, don't they? So there are 2 rows. 1, 2. There are 2 rows. Now, how many eggs are in each row? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in each row, and you can see it's the same here. In fact, I wonder, does that tray of eggs remind you of anything that we use in school? It's a bit like a tens frame, isn't it? Anyway, there are 5 in each row. Now, if we want to know how many eggs there are in total, can you think of a calculation that we could do to work it out? Now think about the fact that there are 2 rows and there are 5 eggs in each row. What does that make you think of? Does it make you think of 2 groups of 5 eggs like we did last week. So there's 2 groups of 5 eggs, 2 rows of 5 eggs. So the calculation would be 5 plus 5, which is equal to 10. So there are 10 eggs altogether. Let's look at this example. Can you see the birds? And they're on some wires. Can you see that they make an array? Because there's the same number in each row and the same number in each column. Isn't that right? So let's see if we can complete these 2 sentences. There are how many rows and there are how many in each row? Well, there are 2 rows again, aren't there? I showed you with those arrows. How many are in each row? Well, there's quite a few. I might count in 2s because it's quicker. You can count with me. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So there are 10 in each row. Now, what calculation would you do this time to find out how many birds there are altogether? There are 2 rows and 10 birds in each row. Well, that's 2 groups of 10. So we would do 10 plus 10, which is equal to 20, isn't it? 20 is 2 10s. Now, there's another way of thinking about the same array, isn't there? Because before we only looked at the rows, but we can also look at the columns. So what would go here? There are how many columns and there are how many birds in each column? Well, we've actually already worked that out, but can you see how? Well, let's see. How many columns are there? Well, these are the columns. So how many of these are there? It's the same as the number of birds in each row, isn't it? We've already counted. We know there's 10. Do you remember? So we know that there are 10 columns, aren't there? Now, how many birds are in each column? Well, again, we've worked it out because it's the number of rows, isn't it? There's 2 birds in each column. So here we'll put a 2. This time, looking at the columns, what calculation would you do to find out how many birds there are altogether? It's not the same as the last one. There are 10 columns and there are 2 birds in each column. That's 10 groups of 2 birds. So that would be 2 plus 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 2. And now we need to add all those up. So let's count in 2s. Count with me. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. There are 20 birds altogether. That's the same as we got last time. So is that a surprise? Are you surprised that we got the same number? No, you shouldn't be. Why are you not surprised? Well, it's the same group of birds, isn't it? It's still all the birds on the wire. We were just looking at it slightly differently. We were looking at the rows first and adding up the birds in each row. And then we looked at the columns and added up the number of birds in each column. So you can look at the rows and add up how many are in each row to find the total. And you can also look at the columns and add up how many are in each column to find the total. In this example here, which calculation is easier to do? 10 plus 10? Or the second one, 2 plus 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 2? What do you think and why? Well, let's ask Taito. Taito, what do you think? Which calculation would you rather do? Well, definitely the first one. Why is that? Well, you're only adding 2 numbers, 10 plus 10. That's so much easier than, 10 2s? That's so many numbers to add together. You could easily get confused and make a mistake. I think I agree with you. I agree. Do you agree with him at home? Yeah, good. Thanks, Taito. No problem. So that's important though. Sometimes it might be easier to add up the rows, or sometimes it might be easier to add up the columns. You can make a choice and do the easier calculation. I hope you're getting the idea. Now, we saw before that a tray of eggs is an array. So an interesting investigation you could do during the week in your own time is to keep a lookout for arrays in the world around you. How many examples can you find? I bet if you look and if you think, you'll find quite a few. I mean, I can think of one or two just now. What about you, Tata? Can you think of any arrays in our daily lives? Well, you know those baking trays for baking muffins, yes? Well, they're arrays, aren't they? Yeah, they are actually. I think you're right. Yeah, let's look at this here. So this is what you're talking about, isn't it, Tao Tao? Yes, it is. So you can see a baking tray there, and you can see there's muffins. Can you see how it's an array? Because there's the same number in each row. And there's also the same number in each column, isn't there? What can we say? How many rows are there? There are, what do you think? 3 rows. And how many in each row? There are 4 muffins in each row. And what about the next one? There are 4 columns and there are 3 in each. Isn't that right? Do you notice anything about the numbers? They are the same, just the other way around. And that's always going to be the case with an array. Why is that? Can you explain? We have already looked at it. If you think about, there's 3 rows. How many are in each row? Well, it's going to be how many columns you have. Isn't that right? Because these are the columns. And same the other way around. I hope that makes sense. Now, what about this picture? Can you see an array? Can you explain your thinking in full, clear mathematical sentences? I'm going to ask the same question another way. Is that an array? Have a think. Tata, what do you think? Is that an array? No, it's not. Can you explain how you know? Well, they're not equal groups. You have to have equal groups in an array. I mean, look at the columns, for instance. Give me the pen, will you? Oh, yeah, sorry. Here you go. Thanks. Okay, so there's 2 in that column, there's 3 in that column, and there's 2 in that. Well, are they the same? No, they're not. So they're not equal columns. It's not an array. Okay, great explanation. Thanks a lot. Good. Can I have the pen back, please? Thank you. Okay, right, now it's over to you to work through some questions in your own time. The first one here, it says build the array shown with counters. You might or might not have counters at home, but there might be other things you can use to show the array, like Lego pieces or raisins or bits of pasta, or you might just draw pictures, and then we have to complete the sentences. This one here, there's a table to complete. The first one's completely done, so you can use that as an example. There's a picture, there's the array, and then you have to describe the columns. Okay, so how many columns, how many in each column, and then you're describing the rows, so how many rows and how many in each row. And then you do 2 different addition number sentences, because you're going to add up the columns and then add up the rows. And you should, of course, get the same total, shouldn't you? Because, well, it's the same whole, isn't it? It's the same whole. We're just working it out a different way. For the last one, you need to draw the array here. So think about the information. What would you draw? And then some problems to make you think a little bit more deeply. There's 3 here. Number 1, Mo and Libby are making arrays, so someone's made a mistake. What mistake have they made? Number 2, it's Toby and Lily, and they're writing number sentences to describe their array here. So who do you agree with and explain why? And then number 3, Jenny makes an array, but she stops, so she hasn't finished her array. I hope you can see that's not a finished array because they're not equal rows or columns. But she has finished her first row, so can you complete her array? I'm going to show you the answers, so pause, close your eyes, hide under the sofa if you're not ready for them. Here we go. So the first 2 challenges, there's 2 apples in each row, isn't that right? But there's 3 rows, so that's 2 plus 2 plus 2, which is equal to 6, 2, 4, 6. So there are 6 apples altogether. And then here are my answers for the table. I'll let you go through those in your own time. I hope you agree with me. And if you don't, that's fine. But try to learn from whatever errors that you made, so next time you're prepared. And then here are the problems with some possible answers. I hope you got on well with those. That's it for this lesson. We hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next week for another problem of the week. So in the meantime, thank you. In the meantime, look after yourselves, take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.